Making up for lost time, here's Wabtech. Smith & Wesson's 1941 catalog listed pine board data for guns and cartridges. There was a supposed standard by then that was well understood, at least among gun geeks, quoted as soft pine board 1 inch or 3/8 inch or 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch that could be penetrated by nearly 60 foot-pound force kinetic energy from some small pistol round out of a certain barrel, out of a certain specific gun, that had been lethal. That meant that any bullet with a similar characteristics or more strength must also be considered capable of producing a casualty by the U.S. Army. 60 foot-pounds, 58 foot-pounds, 59 foot-pounds. The numbers are actually all over the place, but let's just call it nearly 60 foot-pounds. This was also determined by somebody that was the minimum amount that it would take for you to, quote, pierce a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch or 7/8 or 1 inch soft pine board. Now, old growth lumber in those days is not like we have today that's done from tree farms. They're also called pole pigs or pecker poles. So obviously this can't be an equivalent. Old growth grew over longer periods of time, so it had denser spacing for the rings. Why would pine board be the equivalent to animal flesh? Pine board is a good simulant, not perfect. I did a video on this a long time ago, for bone, specifically rib cages. I also did a video explaining that the average thickness before you get penetrative injury by, a random sharp object you might fall on, or a picket fence, or, staking some vampire, you're dealing with skin and muscle and bone thicknesses that all kind of work out the same. And basically, except for hitting bone, period, full stop, every part of the human body and every part of any animal you're hunting and any attacker, whether it be two-legged or four-legged, that you have to deal with that's anywhere near big enough to do serious harm quickly, to stop it, you should do the test based on shooting a actual side of beef or meat. These tests were done against pigs, horses, and cadavers, human and otherwise. And it was found that no matter how they did this, it would have way too many variables for it to be reliable, and that they needed something standardized, so they used ballistic gel. If you're not aware of it, this is based on a gel animal product from pigs that emulates, if you do the ratio correctly, at what percentage of moisture it is, concentration based on it, you end up with something that emulates very closely the effects that you find if you fire a cartridge into an animal while hunting, or an animal that has just recently been put out of its misery, ready for the stockyards to do butchering on, or wherever you're going. Depending on the city you're in, the stockyard and the butcher area is the same area. That's not a joke about Wuhan. But anyway, no. Stop flagging. But even with a fresh cadaver at 98.6, or an animal side of beef freshly taken at 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or direct comparison with what you're supposed to use, which is ballistic gel, 10 or 20%, depending on who's arguing about it in the comment section, at like 40 or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, because you're not supposed to use it at body temperature, or clear ballistics gel that works at 98.6, or even better, bait plastic, that does work at warm temperatures, like human body temperature, and directly simulates flesh, depending on the mix. All of these show consistency if you do the testing right. And they show consistency because they do match, depending on where you get them from, animal tissue. That's what they're supposed to emulate. People saying it's not meant to do it, but then they bring up a chunk of wood from the 1940s and 30s that you can't find unless you go dig it out of your wall? The inconsistency of this is borne out by being, well, it's a fallacy because of an incident. A shrapnel ball explosive grenade was accidentally detonated at close range to a bunch of observers looking at it. All of them had bruises. None of them had any penetration to clothing, but this grenade had passed the test where it went through multiple boards at the same range. So that means that a heavy overcoat of wool or just ordinary clothing a GI would wear at the time would stop a projectile that would normally go through a pine board. That means the pine board test was weak. And this was in the 1940s. This was during the period of time when this should have been still as valid as the Army had. They almost immediately threw it out because it didn't fucking work. Something that was supposed to be lethal, it was a live test that accidentally went off, did not do any casualties potential or just flat out kill anybody. It had passed through many pine boards, so it should have been overkill. And yet it failed. Poorly. Badly. And this is an anecdotal, you're just bringing up an anecdote. So's the thing about the pine board thing. The Box of Truth YouTube channel and website has many, many references to this. So this is my shot across the bow of all true believers. Including a couple of them that said, well, going through some MDF is the equivalent to a certain number of inches of gel. And on that channel, the Juggernaut, because it's usually filled with water jugs, that guy, good YouTube channel, probably being accurate about it, insofar as he does one layer only to simulate ribcage bone and breastbone. Yeah. In fact, the comparison directly to that is based on, again, I did a video about you don't have to worry about bones in the head or the leg or the arm, because by the time you've hit them, you're already hitting something too dense for the bullet to go any further for you to worry about it, because this has like blood vessels, nothing else. There's no internal organs here. The pelvis, the rib cage, the abdomen, the spinal column, the head, these are the examples of places that we would have terminal occurrence. But this whole pine board thing is dumb. It needs to be dropped. It's an example of over-penetration testing to make sure you have a round, if possible, that doesn't go through a wall. That's why certain varieties of buckshot might be better to use if you're worried about an indoor situation than others. That's why you do, again, another test where they do the Juggernaut and drywall and, you get the idea. But you're not comparing them to a human. So, the U.S. Army inch or other soft pine board 58 or 60 foot-pound kinetic energy fallacy was dropped, except for old farts that wouldn't drop it because they learned it in basic. It was dropped by the Army and everybody else a long time ago because it didn't fucking work when it came to grenades. And yeah, there is some direct equivalency there. And also they found out, again, that it didn't work compared to, actually shooting at targets. They found out that the cartridges and guns that were supposed to do certain things didn't. Like there was one that was the Rhodesian standard, 1-2 hit or 1-2-3 hit. I'll look it up. I'll put a link in here. Next, all the links below. Really, there's only 2 of them in their archives, so I'll include a link that goes to an archive of this video, so that those links can't get me in trouble with YouTube. I'm giving them as little as possible to flag. Yeah, the pine board test stopped being a test almost immediately after people would have quoted it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.